Part 1. The letter she never meant to send. I found the letter 3 days after the funeral. It was buried at the back of her dresser, tucked between old scarves and the scent of lavender sachets that hadn't faded. A simple white envelope with my name on it. No date. No return address. Just Michael in her handwriting, delicate, careful, unmistakably hers. It wasn't addressed to me as her son. And that's how I knew it wasn't meant for me. The woman we buried, Margaret Ellis, had always been a private person. My mother was the kind of woman who measured her silences, who built her life out of soft glances and quieter rooms. After Dad died, she never remarried, never even hinted at anyone else. Or so I thought. The funeral had been small. Mostly neighbors and a few distant cousins. I'd stood at the front of the church, hands folded, watching strangers say polite things about a woman none of them really knew. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in years. That night, I stayed in her house for the first time in a decade. I walked through rooms that smelled like time had stopped. Her reading chair. The cracked kitchen tiles. A pot of chamomile tea she never made without thinking of someone. Then I opened the drawer. And found the envelope. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Slower. My darling Thomas, it began. Not Michael. Thomas. I don't know what startled me more, the warmth in her words or the ache of a name I'd never heard her say aloud. She spoke of evenings under a broken-down bridge in a place called Lockwood. Of hiding something too beautiful from a world too cruel. She wrote about regret, about a summer that never ended for her even when it did for him. And then, in the last paragraph. He doesn't know. I never told him. He was too young to understand then. And I was too much of a coward to explain why he was growing up with a father who never looked at him quite right. I sat there for an hour, staring at that one sentence. She wasn't writing to Thomas. She was writing about me. And just like that, the life I thought I understood fractured into something I no longer recognized. Part 2. The man in the photograph. I spent the next morning walking through the house like it was foreign. Every picture frame felt like a lie. Every room a version of a life staged for my benefit. She never told me I wasn't his. I don't even know who he is. I went back to the letter, rereading it with a kind of desperate clarity, looking for anything she hadn't meant to say. My mother never wasted words. Every line was intentional. Which made the omissions cut deeper. No last name for Thomas. No dates. No explanation, just memories dripped in careful prose. Love threaded between guilt and silence. In the last line, she'd written, if he ever finds this, if Michael ever knows, I only hope he'll forgive me for not knowing how to love the truth out loud. Forgiveness. That wasn't the word I was ready for. I opened her desk drawer next. Not searching, digging. Somewhere beneath bills and recipe cards, I found an old photo. Faded, water-warped. A man leaning against the hood of a rust-colored car, cigarette dangling from his lips. He looked young. Late 20s, maybe? Worn denim jacket. A scar cutting through his left eyebrow. There was something unspoken in the way he stood. A kind of restless defiance. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in her handwriting again, Thomas, Lockwood, 1983. I was born in 84. I sat down slowly, the photo resting in my lap. I'd spent 39 years thinking I knew who I came from. That I was my father's son, down to the stiff silence and the way we both hated being photographed. But this man, this Thomas, he looked like motion. Like heat. Like someone who didn't belong inside a frame at all. The next thing I knew, I was on the phone with the Lockwood town clerk's office. Hi, yeah, this is going to sound strange. I'm looking for someone. A man named Thomas possibly lived there in the early 80s. Last name? I don't know. Well, we've had a few Thomases. Anything else? I looked at the photo again. He had a scar above his left eye. There was silence on the other end. Sir, you might want to call the diner on Main. If he's who I think he is, someone there might remember. The line went dead, but the name stuck. So I packed a bag, left my mother's house still smelling of memory, and started driving toward Lockwood. It was 3 hours from the only life I'd ever known. But distance meant nothing compared to what I was about to learn. When I reached the town sign, Welcome to Lockwood, EST 1879, I felt it in my chest. Something was waiting for me here. Something that had my blood in its hands. Part 3. The diner on Main. Lockwood looked like it had been frozen somewhere between 1985 and a long, forgotten autumn. Old brick buildings. An antique store that doubled as a post office. Rusted bikes leaning against cracked benches. The kind of town where secrets grow roots deep enough to forget they were ever planted. The diner was just off the corner of Main, green awning, chipped red door, and a single waitress behind the counter who looked like she hadn't changed her shift since the Reagan administration. She was wiping down laminated menus when I walked in. A few heads turned. Small towns know outsiders by the way they pause before stepping through the door. I sat at the counter. Ordered coffee I didn't want. She poured without asking for sugar or cream. Passing through. No, I said. Looking for someone. She didn't blink. That's so. I slid the photo across the counter like a crime had been committed. You know him. She looked at it, then at me. A beat passed. Maybe two. Then she nodded. Thomas O'Connell, she said. Used to fix cars out behind McKinley's garage. Came in most mornings for eggs, black coffee, and 2 sugars in the second cup. Still around. She leaned on the counter. Depends who's asking. I hesitated, then told her everything, at least what little I knew. About the letter. The photo. My mother's silence. The way a man I'd never met had somehow lived in my shadow all my life. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. He lives out by Echo Lake now, she said. Built a little place there. Keeps to himself. People don't bother him. But I wouldn't just show up. Why not? She gave me a long, level look. Because he's not the man you're looking for, she said. And you might not be the boy he left behind. Her words hit like a blunt object, unassuming but with weight behind them. Still, she scribbled an address on the back of a napkin and handed it over like she was giving me a map to somewhere holy or haunted. I left a tip I couldn't afford and walked back into the afternoon sun. The road to Echo Lake wound through dense woods and narrow turns. It felt like a place you couldn't find unless you already knew where to look. When I saw the house, I knew it had to be his. Small. Weathered. Standing just beyond the tree line. A truck in the driveway. Smoke curling from the chimney like a breath drawn slow and cautious. I sat in my car for 5 full minutes before I got out. Every step toward the porch felt like walking through the fog of someone else's life. And then, before I could knock, the door creaked open. And there he was. Thomas. Older now? Grayer. But the scar was still there, carved above the brow like a mark of unfinished things. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at me. Then, with a voice low and gravel-worn, he said, "You've got her eyes." Part 4, her eyes, his silence. There was something strange about standing face to face with a man whose blood might be mine. Not fear, exactly. Not even resentment. Just a kind of slow, silent collapse of everything I thought I knew about myself. He opened the door wider and gestured inside. The house was quiet. Sparse. Smelled like cedar and oil and something older underneath. Tools lined the wall. A single photo hung by the fireplace, too distant to make out, but I knew without seeing it that she was in it. He sat without asking if I'd sit too. I did anyway. "You came all this way," he said. "So I guess you know." "I don't know anything," I said. "That's why I'm here?" He nodded. Poured 2 glasses of water. "No questions. No apologies." "Did she ever tell you about me?" he asked. "No. Just a letter. I found it after she died." His jaw tensed. "Margaret never said goodbye, not really. One day she just stopped coming." "Did you know about me?" His eyes met mine, calm but unreadable. "I suspected. But when she left, I figured it wasn't my right to know." "You didn't want to find out?" "I did," he said. "But I was younger then. Angry. I told myself if she needed me, she'd come back. And she never did." The silence that followed didn't feel accusing. It felt like 2 people trying to speak across a river neither of them built. He stood, walked to the mantel, took down the photo. Brought it to me. My mother, young, maybe 25, smiling in the sunlight. Her hand on his shoulder. His arm around her waist. A different version of her than I'd ever known. Not careful. Not afraid. Alive. "I loved her," he said. "More than I was ready for. She used to say I made her reckless." I looked down. She said she didn't know how to love the truth out loud. He closed his eyes like those words hurt more than I meant them to. "She wasn't wrong," he said. I didn't realize I was shaking until I set the glass down. "So, what happens now?" He sat again, slower this time. Not with age, but with caution. "I don't have an answer for that," he said. "I don't know what you want from me. Or what I can give." I didn't either. Not really. But then I heard myself say, a name. A story. Something that makes this real. He stared into the fireplace. The logs were cold. Nothing burned there. And after a long moment, he spoke again. Slower now. Softer. "She was going to leave him," he said. "The man you grew up calling father." She told me. But then something changed. I never knew what. Maybe she got scared. Maybe she thought he'd give you more stability than I could. Maybe she saw something in me she didn't trust with a child. He looked up. And maybe she was right. I didn't know what to do with that. The grief. The maybe. The way he said it without bitterness. But just as I was about to speak, he reached into the drawer beside his chair and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a tiny silver bracelet. A baby's nameplate, untouched by time, and engraved on it, Michael Thomas Ellis. I blinked. He said nothing. He didn't have to, because in that moment I realized he had known. All along. Part 5. The name I was never given. I don't remember reaching for the bracelet. One moment it was in the box, the next it was in my hands, cool, light, and impossibly small. Michael Thomas Ellis. My name. His name. A name she never spoke. You kept it all this time? I asked. Thomas nodded slowly. She gave it to me the week before she left. Said, if she ever changed her mind, she'd come back for it. I turned it over in my hands. And she didn't. No. The silence between us wasn't hostile, but it was thick with everything unsaid. Regret, mostly, and time. So much time. I looked up. Why didn't you fight for her? Or me? He didn't flinch. Because I didn't know how. I didn't grow up with men who fought for love. I grew up with men who walked away and called it mercy. There was no self-pity in his voice. Just history. I always thought I was like my father, I said. He was strict, quiet. I thought I got that from him. You did, Thomas said. And you didn't. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw echoes of myself I hadn't recognized until now. The shape of the jaw, the set of the shoulders, the way he kept his feelings just below the surface like they might betray him if they surfaced too quickly. What do I do with this? I asked. The bracelet. No. All of it. Thomas leaned back, stared at the ceiling like it held the answer. You live with it. You let it change you, or you don't. But either way, it's yours now. I set the bracelet down carefully. I thought I came here to find out where I came from, I said. But the truth is, I think I was hoping to be angry, to blame someone. He nodded. And now, I'm tired, I said. He let that sit for a while. Then, for the first time, his voice softened. You were just a boy, he said. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I let her leave without asking why. But I never stopped thinking about you. That may not mean much now, but it's the truth. And maybe that was the beginning of something. Maybe not forgiveness, but recognition. A hand reaching through time. The fire in the hearth finally caught. He'd lit it sometime while we were talking, and I hadn't even noticed. He stood, walked to the mantel again, took down a second photo I hadn't seen before. This one was older, black and white, a child in a stroller, hair like mine, eyes like hers. Is that me? I asked. He smiled faintly. She sent it once. No note, no return address, just that. I carried it in my wallet for 20 years. My throat tightened. I didn't ask why he hadn't written back. I think I already knew the answer. I stood then, the weight of the bracelet in my pocket. I should go, I said. He nodded. Didn't ask me to stay. Didn't push for anything more. As I stepped out into the quiet woods, the sun just beginning to lower behind the trees, he called out one last time. Michael! I turned. I hope you'll come back. And for the first time I realized, so did I. Part 6. The Quiet Between Two Strangers. I drove back to the motel just outside Lockwood, the bracelet in my pocket pressing lightly against my thigh like a heartbeat I hadn't known I was missing. I didn't call anyone. I didn't turn on the TV. I just sat on the edge of the motel bed and stared at the ceiling until the shadows stretched long and the hum of the fridge became the only sound I could hear. I wasn't ready to go back home. Not yet. The place I thought I was from didn't feel like mine anymore. I thought of my mother, Margaret, wondering if she ever sat with the same ache, wondering if she'd made the right choice. Did she look at me year after year and see him in my face? Did it hurt her to keep the truth folded up and buried, or did it keep her safe? The next morning I drove to the lake. Echo Lake was still, glassy, indifferent. The kind of place where sound feels swallowed before it fully forms. I sat on the old dock, shoes off, toes grazing the cold surface of the water. That's where Thomas found me again. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood at the edge of the dock, holding 2 coffees. One black, one with 2 sugars. I didn't know how you took it, he said, handing me the second. I didn't either, I replied. But this is right. We sat side by side, the way 2 men who share something invisible tend to sit, facing the water, not each other. He nodded toward the horizon. Your mother used to come here every Sunday. I didn't know she liked lakes. She didn't, he said. She liked the silence. Said it made the lies settle. I let that sit for a while. I don't know how to talk to you, I admitted. Not really. Part of me wants to ask a million things. Part of me wants to go back to not knowing. Thomas sipped his coffee. Ask, he said. So I did. We talked for hours. About the summer they met, how she'd crashed her car outside town and he'd been the one to tow it. How they'd spent nearly 3 months circling each other before admitting what they were. How she used to hum to herself when she was afraid. He told me she left without a word the day she found out she was pregnant. Said she wrote a letter but never mailed it. Said he kept expecting her to walk back through the door and change everything. She never did, he added quietly. And then he turned to me. Do you hate her? I didn't answer for a long time. No, I said finally. I think I understand her. But that doesn't mean I know how to forgive her. That's fair. And you? I asked. Do you hate her? His expression didn't change. I did, he said. Then I missed her. Then I blamed myself. After that, I just hoped one day I'd meet you. A wind stirred the surface of the lake. Tiny ripples that spread and scattered. Why didn't you come find me? I asked again, but softer this time. He looked out across the water. Because I didn't want to hurt you twice. I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe nothing needed saying. The sun dipped low, light folding over the hills like an old blanket. He stood. I'm not asking to be your father, he said. But if you want to come back sometime, if you ever want to sit here again, I'll be here. And then he walked away. No pressure. No promises. Just the quiet echo of something that had waited too long. I stayed until it was almost dark. Then I stood, looked out across the lake, and whispered into the wind. I might come back. Part 7. What my father never said. I didn't go back right away. I returned home to the house I grew up in. The one I'd cleaned out after the funeral, now emptier than it had ever been. Her scent was fading. The framed pictures seemed less certain of their place. I put the bracelet in a drawer I'd never used before. I wasn't ready to look at it every day. Not yet. Life didn't stop. Work resumed. People offered condolences with faces that didn't expect anything in return. No one knew what had changed inside me, or who I'd become quietly while they stayed exactly the same. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in a window and wonder whose face I was wearing. I started dreaming about him, Thomas. In the dreams, we weren't talking, just sitting, on that dock, in silence. Sometimes he was younger, the way he looked in the photograph. Other times older, as he was now. Always watching me, like he was waiting for me to ask the right question. I didn't. I never did. Weeks passed. Then months. One evening, I was sorting through the last of my mother's old files when I found something else. A key. No label. No explanation. Just small and tarnished. For a long time, I just stared at it, turning it over in my hand. Then I remembered the lockbox in her closet. The one she always told me was just old paperwork. I found it under a stack of quilts. The key fit perfectly. Inside, a single envelope, yellowed with age. It was addressed to Thomas O'Connell. Stamped. Never sent. I opened it. If you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to put it in the mailbox. It means I let fear win again. You should have known about Michael. You should have been part of his life. But I told myself it would be simpler if I chose the path already built. I was wrong. Every time I looked at him, I saw you. I see you still. It ended without closure. No signature. No date. Just those lines, unfinished. Like she'd folded it halfway through a breath she couldn't bear to finish. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it back, tucked it into my pocket, and got into the car. Lockwood hadn't changed. Towns like that don't. When I reached his house, I saw a truck in the drive but no lights on. I knocked anyway. Took a long time before the door opened. His face was the same. Only his eyes looked different. Like they'd been waiting. I found something, I said. He stepped aside without a word. I handed him the letter. Watched him unfold it with hands that didn't tremble, but didn't steady either. He read it once. Then again. Then he sat down. Slow. Reverent. She wanted to send it, I said. She just never did. He looked at me. She didn't need to, he said. I think I always knew how she felt. I just didn't know what to do with it. I sat across from him. There was no fire this time. Just the weight of everything we'd never said. I think she loved us both. I said. He nodded. I think we both spent a lot of years trying not to believe that. I pulled the bracelet from my coat pocket and set it between us. He stared at it for a long time. I used to dream about giving this to you, he said. Back when I thought I might still matter. You do, I said, and I meant it. Not because he'd earned it. Not because he deserved it. But because I needed him to. And maybe because he needed me to, too. Part 8. The man I chose to be. I stayed that night. Not because we had anything left to say, but because silence didn't feel like a wall anymore. It felt like ground. Something we could stand on even if it still shifted under us. He offered me the spare room, the one he said he built when he thought someone might visit. No one ever had. The bed creaked. The blankets smelled like pine and years. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the house breathe. In the morning, I woke to the sound of eggs frying and a pot of coffee sputtering. He was at the stove, humming something low and wordless. It might have been a tune my mother used to hum. Or maybe my memory was filling in what I wanted to hear. We didn't talk much over breakfast. Just a few quiet sentences about the lake, the trees, the coming winter. Before I left, he walked me to the truck. You going back home? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. Got someone waiting for you? No. Just a job I don't like and a house I didn't choose. He looked at me then, really looked. Then maybe it's time you start choosing. I smiled barely. Maybe it is. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photo of me as a baby, the one he'd kept in his wallet all those years. He handed it to me. She looked like hope in that photo, he said. And you looked like the start of something I was too scared to believe in. I took it, folded it carefully, tucked it into my jacket. I'll come back, I said. Soon. He didn't nod. Didn't smile. Just said, I know. And I believed him. I drove away from Echo Lake with something I didn't have when I arrived, a name that belonged to me not by blood, not by law, but by choice. A story I'd been denied, then given. And a man who had once been a stranger, but now existed in the part of me that would never again feel rootless. I don't know what kind of father he would have been, but I know what kind of son I want to be now. Not for the man who raised me out of duty. Not for the mother who loved me in silence. But for the man who waited in the woods, forgiveness in his hands and a bracelet he never stopped believing he might one day give back. Sometimes the family we were meant to have isn't lost. Sometimes it's just waiting quietly. Until we're ready to listen.